Hi, Father Ian Van Heusen here. I'm here with Rob Agnelli. We're on our last video. We're rounding out our series on the 10 virtues of the Blessed Virgin Mary. It's Divine Wisdom is the last one. But before we get into that, one of the things, a distinction that Aquinas makes when it comes to virtues, and he comes to most things, is he makes this distinction with connatural knowledge, which is you can have knowledge of something discursively. For example, I could understand a definition of chastity. He uses the example of chastity.
You can reason to it, right?
You can reason to it and understand it by reason. But then there's the kind of knowledge that comes from actually being chaste, right?
Yeah.
So the classic thing, the funny thing with like coaches in sports, not all of the best players become good coaches, and not all the best coaches were good players.
Yeah,
right?
and normally it's exactly that. The best players don't make good coaches because all their knowledge is connatural.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's all from experience. They have no idea, using baseball as an example. So it's just, like it tends to be that the players who really had to work at it, who had to actually figure out how best to generate bat speed, how this doesn't come naturally, right? So they're good teachers because they can discursively say, okay, top hand on top, bottom hand on bottom, and all of that. Like so they can teach it, whereas the person who just has the God-given talent more so just says, well, you just hit the ball. What are you doing? Right?
Yeah,
they just know how to hit.
Yeah, and that's interesting. If you're working with kids with sports, there's some kids who just naturally gravitate towards sports where they're naturally fluid with emotions.
Yeah.
Like the first time they pick up a bat, they can
Yeah,
swing.
there's just certain things, like in coaching, coaching high school baseball, there's certain kids that they do stuff that I couldn't teach them. They just naturally, the ball just jumps off the bat differently when they hit it.
Yeah.
And all of that. So yeah, that's the idea of connatural knowledge, is that they know how to hit a baseball, but could they explain it? No, they just know it experientially. They know when their swing was good, they know when it was bad, but they can't tell you why. Right?
Yeah, which is the fascinating thing with sports. And like I work with a physical trainer, like I talked before, is learning things that connatural way. You have to experience it over and over again, which really starts to get at the idea of wisdom. Wisdom, I think Aquinas puts it this way, is the fruit of connatural knowledge of God. That we become like God when we experience God through the sacraments, through acts of faith, hope, and love. And he ties wisdom, I believe, specifically with love, divine love. That is, when we surrender our will, when we experience His presence in a consistent way, the fruit of that is we have a kind of intuitive knowledge of God.
Yeah, and wisdom ultimately, right, is about, at least divine wisdom is about understanding how all things fit together for your good.
Yeah.
Right, like how all things are ordered to your personal good.
Well, I think, and also it is knowledge of God in Himself.
Because it's self-revelation of God, because He's revealed Himself to you.
Yeah.
You now understand how it all begins to fit together.
Because I know Aristotle talks in metaphysics that the highest wisdom is of first principles. So you're part right. And I think the way I would also put it, in terms of doing God's will, is I talk about this a lot with married couples, is after a certain point of experiencing your wife over years, you have an intuitive sense of who she is and what she wants. Like right now, if I gave you the task,
I'm a little scared you're going to sit
if I gave you the task of picking something she might like to eat for dinner, you'd probably have a good sense, maybe not, but
I would totally.
Yeah.
I would totally.
Or like picking out something she would like.
Or even just a movie, right? Like a movie she would like to watch. For sure. Yeah, you do, because you have you begin to develop a mindset in which I'm almost able to put myself inside of her the way she thinks.
Exactly.
Classically, right? And in that way, I am wise of the ways of Allison, right?
Yeah. Which, when we start to think of it that way, the Blessed Virgin Mary literally spent 30 years with Jesus, seeing how He responded in every little situation, which is a whole kind of knowledge of God that we cannot even begin to grasp.
Yeah, when sometimes when people go, well, Jesus spent all His time with sinners, I'm like, no, He spent about 30 years with somebody who wasn't a sinner, right? And just think of how formative that was for her, right? To be able to put on the mind of God, and to see things from that perspective, right? In that dual relationship, like mother to son and God to His daughter, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is so one of the ideas, it's a really loaded theological concept, which on first hand doesn't seem like a big deal, is the idea of friendship with God. So when I was in seminary, I took a class, an elective on friendship in the moral life. So the funny thing was I was the only one who signed up for the class, and the professor designed it.
You had no friends.
That
That's awesome.
That was the joke.
No wonder you wanted God to be your friend.
That was the joke. I was like, yeah, I got to learn how to make friends. But we studied all of the philosophers and all the thinkers on friendship, including like modern philosophers like Kant and things like that, which they obviously get some things wrong with friendship. But one of the key things that Aristotle and Aquinas talks about with friendship is that part of friendship is living with the person, being with them day in and day out. And this is why when you've lived with somebody like a college roommate or a friend in college, when you spent like years daily in each other's presence, you have a sense of who they are even long after that you're no longer living with them on a regular basis, right?
Yeah, and friendship is not something you could do from far away. Right?
Yeah.
Like you can have relationships with people from far away, but friendship is not it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and even you go deeper, right, with the fact that what friendship ultimately with God, right, is He's elevating us, right? Because the other thing Aristotle says is, you have to be equals.
And when you become like that, who you're a friend with.
Yeah, and you can't, like, as much as you love your dog, he's really not your best friend. Right?
Yeah.
Like, because you're not equals.
Wait, whoa.
I know, I just crossed the line, sorry.
Oh, jeez. Charbel loves me.
Well, you are the same guy who had no one in friends with in his class either, so maybe I did step in it.
Charbel's the only one who understands me in this world.
Yeah, that's probably it. That's probably totally
you know what's funny? I think Hitler once said.
Oh, wait a second. Did we just shift to Hitler?
Well, no,
use Hitler as your relationship with your dog. I gotta see where this is going.
No. Hitler actually, I think, once said the only person he trusts is his dog. So
I wonder if there's a connection there.
I have friends.
So anyway, there's no friendship requires a certain equality, right? And there's like, this is Aristotle. He's like, you can never be friends with the gods, because they're way above you.
Yeah.
But here it is, like God elevating us, right, by becoming man. And so Mary has this intimate friendship with God. Yeah. And her relationship was maternal with Jesus. But there's also this just deep, abiding, like, friendship between the two of them.
What's fascinating to think about it is that in her unique relationship with God and with Jesus, first she is over God, and then she sees the God-man grow up, and all of that.
Yeah, and yet he's still this like dutiful son to her, even in heaven. Yeah. Right, even in heaven. Yeah. Right, and that's this is the it's important to like grasp the virtues. They don't just stop at her death. Yeah. Right. Like she exercises them now. Yeah. And this is why we trust her to intercede on our behalf, and we trust, like St. Louis de Montfort says, her intercession is all powerful, because Christ never denies her, because she never asked for something that he wasn't going to give anyway. Yeah. Exactly. So being enlightened with that wisdom of God, the ways of God, makes her the perfect mother. Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. So the question is, how do we become Marian in receiving that wisdom? Is to be with Jesus Christ on a regular basis, to walk with Jesus Christ. Yeah, and that starts with, again, if we're sticking to sort of the Louis de Montfort method, is going to Jesus through her. Yeah. Right? Because ultimately that's the way that's most pleasing to him. That's the way he set it up, right at the foot of the cross. Yeah. That's how he set it up, and it's what brings him the most glory, and that's the beauty of it, is that we get to participate in this, this story that Christ is writing, and we're pulled into his life even now. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So in a practical way, switching towards the practical, the Rosary. I mean, we haven't talked as much about the Rosary, but the Rosary, we're walking with Jesus through Mary. And this is the way to, because I think the challenge, if we don't understand the perfection of the Blessed Virgin Mary as a creature, as immaculately conceived, without the stain of original sin, we lose a sense of Christ's humanity. And we also, because, hopefully Tim and Ed, I hope you guys aren't offended, but sometimes you come to expect this, right? The Protestant, what Protestants believe. Part of it, when they deny the role of the Blessed Virgin Mary, they also deny the idea that humanity can be transformed completely, that humanity can reach perfection. Yeah. Well, in a certain sense, you and I are sure of that, because Christ has already done it once, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, like this is the at the crux of all the Marian dogmas, right? They're always about Jesus, right? Like the Immaculate Conception. Like I can imagine that Christ redeemed all mankind. Was it the best way to redeem? Well, I can think of a better way. What if he redeemed someone before they fell? Oh wait, he did do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's the best possible, right? And then you go to, okay, how do we know that we're going to share in his bodily resurrection? Oh, because somebody already did, right?
Yeah.
Like it always robs some of his power, like that he can do that with a human being.
Yeah.
Like all of his promises, he's shown he's going to deliver. He's already shown he can, and Mary is the one he's delivered them to. So that increases, like this is why she's our sweetness and our hope, right?
Yeah.
Like because he's already done it with her, like, and he's promising to do it with me.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a great point. That's a great point. So on a practical level, the more we approach Jesus through Mary, this is the classical point of St. Louis de Montfort, the more we come to truly understand who Jesus is and to live out our faith. And that's why the Rosary, I've been seeing a lot of fruit from preaching the Rosary, praying the Rosary, and teaching the students to pray the Rosary.
Yeah, I mean, in truth, I've never gone to Mary in the Rosary and been disappointed.
Yeah.
You know, it's a habit in my life. Every single day, you know, I offer it to her. Days when it's hard, I just envision each little bead being a rose, and I ask my guardian angel to take it up to her and give. And other days when I'm able to meditate well, I'm entering into Christ's life.
Yeah.
But it's one of those prayers that it's you know, like John Paul II called it the perfect prayer, right?
Yeah.
Because it really invokes the entire person.
Yeah.
I'm praying it body, soul, you know, everything, right?
Yeah. You know, I'll be honest with you. I haven't always been as all in on the Rosary. It's like a tug of war, because I was raised in the Protestant South, and the Southern influence kind of, and it's an interesting dynamic, because I know a lot of we see that a lot with converts and things like that. But
yeah, I think
I will say, though it doesn't come natural to me. That's the best way to say it. It hasn't come natural to me. The more I embrace it, the more fruits I see in my ministry and in my life.
Yeah, you think about the story of Saint Dominic, right? Like so as he's learning the Rosary, he's trying to go around and preach against the Albigensian heresy, and he's getting nowhere, no traction. And he has this encounter with Mary, and she's like, preach my Rosary instead. And so he goes and he would start all of his preaching with a single decade of the Rosary. He would preach on some mystery and then pray a decade, right? And all of a sudden, all of southern France is now converting back to the church. You know, it's one of those things.
Well, and of course, with the way when we tell that story, we assume that he was like, it was like there was like violins playing and like angelic sounds in the background, and him being like, oh yes, Blessed Virgin Mary, I'll do whatever you want. Yeah. Whereas in reality, he might have been like, I still want to.
Yeah, I want to preach. I want to be the guy. I got to be the guy. I'm going to convert the world, right? Like that zeal, absolutely.
Or he's like, I still think we need to like go back to like an intellectual argument with my 5 points about why Albigensianism is a heresy. Yeah. You know.
Yeah.
And that's I'm coming to appreciate as I get older. I think we do tend to idealize. And I think sometimes people go to the opposite extreme where they try to pretend like the saints are just like us. But the idealization or the like, there's no difference between a saint and everybody else, both of those extremes are very problematic.
Yeah.
And going back to what we were talking about with the negative emotions, the one thing I've learned about negative emotions and emotions in general is you cannot completely control them. And that's one of the things, like when I'm doing counseling with people, this is somewhat of a tangent, but I'll bring it back to the Rosary. When I'm doing counseling with people, one of the most difficult parts sometimes of trauma is you have unexpected emotions that are not what you expect and are not socially acceptable.
Yeah, sure.
So like, let's say somebody in your circle dies, right? And everybody's sad. And secretly you're happy. For whatever reason, like they hurt you, you didn't get along with them well, and you're happy about the fact that they died. And like sometimes in spiritual direction, whatever, you have to get at like, that's really dark. Like to like be happy, like to experience the emotion of joy at somebody else's death is a really dark thing. But I mean, that's more of an extreme example, but we all have some of those moments. And so what I would say with my experience of the Rosary is my inclination is not towards it immediately, but the more that I embrace it, I see all of these fruits that even right now as you're talking, it's not like I'm saying like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. I'm like, no, I experience a little resistance. Because personally, I like a little bit more like St. Thomas Aquinas, St. John of the Cross.
Well, see, I'm way more on that level. All of my going back to connatural knowledge, right? All of my love for the Rosary has been from the experience of doing it. I just opened myself, like I already talked about the one experience already, but I can point to 1,000 other like experiences of the Rosary, these deep, really deep experiences of Mary's love for me and her showing me Jesus. And these aren't like deep mystical experiences. It's just everyday confirmations, like signal graces, whatever. So for me, that's really good for me because I'm not I'm not an experiential guy. I tend to be more of like, a discursive reasoning guy.
I like the idea of just spending a half hour in silent meditation or something like that. But
so this was what I was saying earlier about John Paul II. His response to people like me was literally in his encyclical on the Rosary. He says, "Why not try it?" And I remember reading that, and I'm like, okay, I'll try it. Like, thank you, Holy Father, I'll try it. And it totally changed my life. Totally changed my life. So, and I stopped reasoning about it. Even when I'm praying, I'll start to reason. I'm like, what is really going on here? I'm like, oh, I'm not even going there.
And I'll throw it out. So I have my Rosary challenge. I don't know if I can blast it out to the whole world, but locally, I'll say in the Diocese of Raleigh. In the Diocese of Raleigh, I make you a promise that if you make a commitment to pray the Rosary every single day, that your life will get better. And if it doesn't, there's not some signal grace or something in a year, 1 year exactly, 365 days, I will give you $1,000. Now, I don't want to blast out to the whole world, Tim, because I don't want somebody in like another country calling me up and saying, hey, I pray the Rosary every day. But I make that commitment to anybody in the Diocese of Raleigh. 365 days, you do not see a difference in your life, I'll give you $1,000. So
let's put his money where his mouth is.
There you go. So this has been Father Ian Van Heusen with Rob Agnelli talking about the 10 virtues of the Blessed Virgin Mary. God bless.